introduction. Hello everybody. Dzień dobry. Serdecznie witam. That's it, no more Polish today. Lovely to see so many of you here. Thank you very much for coming along. I won't repeat what my colleague told you during the introduction, but suffice to say I was working out the other day that I've been in the language teaching industry for 18 years now. How did that happen? 18 years. And as you heard, I've been very busy during that time. But there has been time for my interests and hobbies, and I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit more about myself before we get going. As you heard, I think one of my passions is music, probably similar to some of you. I am an occasional DJ. Usually just in my bedroom with the dog listening. But once, one glorious night in a nightclub, a night that I will never forget. The people who were there probably forgot it already, I would say. So I'm a big reader as well. I've always got a book on the go, like many of you, I'm sure. As you heard mentioned, I'm very pleased that winter is coming. I'm not a fantasy television fan, but snowboarding is coming. And snowboarding is my big passion. I've been doing that for 25 years, so some of you are probably not looking forward to the cold weather. I certainly am. What else can I tell you? Well, one more passion, but rather than explain too much about it, I'm going to show you a photograph that illustrates that passion, or should I say half a photograph, because on the other side of the photograph is something that will give you a clue to what my other big passion is. Any guesses what's there on the other side of the photograph? Have you been looking at my Facebook page? Well done, it is indeed a monkey. Hello, come in and join us, hi. This photograph was taken on my honeymoon in Indonesia, not with the monkey. I do have a human wife. She's Polish, and I've lived in Poland for 12 years now. So my passion is not monkeys, it's nature in general. I love the natural world. I think David Attenborough should be made into the Prime Minister and King. Really a good idea. My passions, I guess, are similar to yours. Let's have a little bit, now you know a little bit more about me. There's one thing I promised to do, of course, because there's one more important member of my writing team, and I promised him that I would show a photograph today, so here he is. This is Flash, my dog, a very important member of the writing team, in charge of making sure I take regular breaks from the desk. So there we go. Job done. I've shown it. You know a little bit more about me now. Let's have a look at... I'm skipping ahead. Let's look at the Queen of England. Did I tell you where I was from? Can you guess from my accent which country I'm from? From England, of course. Therefore, you know what I do at 5 p.m. every day. Cup of tea. Cup of tea with the Queen at 5 p.m. like we all do in the UK. Or actually, in my case, coffee. Because very unusually for an Englishman, I don't like tea with milk. No. It's got to be coffee for me, as black as a moonless night. And I probably drink a little bit too much coffee. I've been trying to cut down recently, and I'm down to just 1 cup a day now. I was actually reading recently that you can drink up to 25 cups of coffee a day without it harming your heart. Can you imagine? 25 cups of coffee a day? I would never sleep. Now, I think I don't need it, but thank you. Thank you very much. You can hear me, right? Yeah. Good, okay. Where was I? So, what I thought we might do is explore this very important question, tea versus coffee, just a little bit further. So I'm going to hand over to you in a moment. You'll quickly see that I won't be doing all the talking today. I'm going to ask you to be involved, and that will mean you need to talk to the person you're sitting next to. So the first job, please, is to have a good look at them. Do they look friendly? Good. No? There are some spare seats at the front. please, if you're sitting next to someone unfriendly. We're all friendly down here. Say something nice. Hello, how are you? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So great. Here's what I would like you to do, please. I'm going to ask you to talk to that friendly person and find out whether you're a tea person or whether you're a coffee person. But not only that. Just a moment, please. Just a moment. I love an enthusiastic crowd, but just for a moment, please. Not only whether you're a tea or coffee person. Excuse me back there. Thank you for your enthusiasm, it's wonderful, but let me just finish the instructions first. Come on. So not only tea or coffee, but do you prefer spicy food or is it mild food? Do you like a wild night out or is it more of a quiet night in these days? And the all-important question, is it Pitt or is it Clooney? So 2 or 3 minutes, off you go.
Wow.
Now that's what I call enthusiasm. Thank you very much.
This is the beginning of the conference.
It's the beginning. Try again tomorrow at this time. Okay. I'm very interested in what you came up with. I'm going to do it with a show of hands. So tea people, show me your hand. It's about 50-50 today, I would say. Spicy food people, where are you? Okay. You're in my gang, I love spicy food. Now, wild night out people, where are you? 2 hands, sir. Can you guys come and see me at the end of the session? And the all-important question, if you like pitch, raise your hand. 50-50 again. Okay, very good. Probably the best answer I've ever had to this question. One lady once raised her hand and said, "Can I have a quiet night in with Pitt and Clooney?" Personalisation, I'm sorry. Okay. Very good. So, a noisy activity to start us off. And this is what we're talking about today. We're talking about personalised speaking activities. And this is a very, very flexible one. By that I mean you can imagine this is your whiteboard. You can write whatever options you want up there. So imagine you've just done sports in class, the topic of sports. You can have play sports versus watch sports. You can have indoor sports versus outdoor sports. If it's Christmas time, it even works. You can have giving presents versus receiving presents. Turkey versus car, for example. So a very flexible activity in terms of topic and levels. But it's also an activity that shows us some of the basic principles of successful personalised speaking activities, and these are they. First of all, if a speaking activity like this is going to be successful, it needs, of course, to be motivating. And there are basically two types of motivation in the language classroom. The first of these is called mechanical motivation. This refers to having some kind of puzzle to solve. And the students get satisfaction out of talking about the solution to the puzzle. The second and probably more common kind of motivation is through talking about yourself, because let's face it, it's human nature to want to give your feelings and opinions. So personalisation as a source of motivation is the second. Very often activities combine both of them. The other key principle is setup, and this refers to us as the teachers. If we're going to be successful, instructions need to be clear. And the clearest way often to set something up is with a demonstration. You may have been scratching your head wondering why I was telling you about my tea and coffee drinking habits. Actually, I would do the same thing in class, because what that does is give you, the students, an idea of the kind of language I would like you to use and the sort of length of time I would like you to speak about each topic. And I think if we're going to ask the students to share of themselves, we should be willing to share of ourselves as well. Task preparation is the next key principle. You didn't need it because you're all fluent speakers of English, but your students will need time to think about what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. And if you provide them with that time, you're more likely to succeed. And finally, closure. Feedback is required, but not only on the language you heard, very importantly, also on the content of what you heard. So some key principles to success in personalised speaking activities. And we'll come back to a number of these throughout the session. Very good. Speaking of the session, here's a quick menu for you. We're going to start off with a definition and a little discussion of the origins of personalisation as a classroom technique and as a principle of humanistic methodology. Then we'll look at personalising input, language input, and how we can make even controlled practice student-centred. Then I want to switch after input to output and look at some of the pitfalls of using an activity like the one that we just did in the classroom, and of course suggest solutions to those pitfalls. Solutions through either careful classroom management or through careful materials design. One of those key principles we said was providing feedback, and it's a challenge to do so when you've got a class full of students all talking to each other. So I want to probably remind you of, possibly introduce you to, a technique called delayed error correction, which helps us to feedback on language when it's a large group of students speaking. And to help us along the way, we're going to be looking at ideas and examples from Language Hub, the latest 6-level general English course from Macmillan. I'm proud to say that along with John Hurd, who's here somewhere, John, I co-authored the B1 level. And we thought a lot about how we could take the complexity out of teaching. I'll tell you more about that later. We've also chosen topics that we think lend themselves very well to personalisation. So there'll be much more about that. Okay, so let's start with a definition, and we'll turn to the experts. We'll turn to some famous names that I'm sure you'll recognise for a definition of exactly what we mean when we say personalisation in the ELT classroom. A name you'll all recognise, of course, Scott Thornbury, on his excellent blog, which is also a book, An A to Z of ELT. Scott says the following: when you personalise language, you use it to talk about your knowledge, experience, and feelings. Concise and to the point. If you look at the British Council Teaching English website, another great source of ideas and methodology for teachers, they say personalisation happens when activities allow students to use language to express their own ideas, feelings, preferences, and opinions. And finally, one more famous name, Jeremy Palmer, in his book Essential Teacher Knowledge, that many of us probably use during our teacher training. He says that personalisation is when students use language to talk about themselves and the things that interest them. Great. 1,000,000 points for anyone who can tell me who this lady is. The other day I was doing this session in Germany and one lady shouted out, "Is it your mum?" No, she looks lovely, but it's not my mum. So I'll tell you her name, which might ring a bell. This is Gertrude Moskowitz. Okay, Gertrude Moskowitz wrote a book in 1978. It was a book called Caring and Sharing in the Foreign Language Class. 1978. Now, Moskowitz was one of the earliest proponents of a humanistic approach to language teaching. In a nutshell, that means putting the students at the centre of learning. Now, the book, you can tell from the title and from the cover illustration that it is rather touchy-feely in places. I think Gertrude was a bit of a hippie, to be honest. But she suggested some principles for using personalisation in the classroom that are still relevant, I think, 41 years later. And I want to have a look at just 3 of the principles that Moskowitz suggested. I'll need your help because some of the words are blanked out. Moskowitz said, connect the content with the student something. Lives. Well done. Yes, with the students' lives. By doing so, you are focusing on what they know rather than what they are ignorant of. From the learner's standpoint, there's quite a psychological difference in dealing with what is familiar, well done, rather than what is unknown. In a nutshell, again, I think that Moskowitz was saying that personalisation builds confidence in our students. Because they're talking about a very familiar topic, themselves. Next, Moskowitz said that we should use the students' something. Not resources. It's responses, yes. Use the students' responses in the lesson. Since the students are giving of themselves, we should utilise what they share by asking the class questions relating to what has been exchanged in the interaction. A long-winded way, I think, of saying that personalisation requires feedback. Feedback on the content of what was said. You know, your student very excitedly comes into class and says, last weekend I go to Paris. And you say, but go is an irregular verb in the past tense. And their face drops. Because they want to tell you about Paris. So before we deal with the language, we need to give them a chance to express their opinions and feelings, react to that, and then deal with the language afterwards. Moskowitz also said that your students have ideas too. Don't overlook an important resource of humanistic techniques. Who can tell you what interests them better than the students themselves? Absolutely. If we're looking for a sort of a motto for today's session, and it's kind of a motto for my own teaching and materials writing practice, it is this: bringing the students' lives to the content brings the content to life. Neatly put, stolen from Moskowitz. Very good. Now, I forgot to tell you, I can see lots of people furiously making notes. I'm sorry. We will make a copy of the slides available through the teacher training website, so you can take as many or as few notes as you wish. Good. All right. So, personalising language input, vocabulary, grammar, etc. They've let me out from behind my desk recently, and I've been travelling a lot more. I'm not writing anything just now, so I've been doing a bit more teacher training, and recently I went to Germany to deliver a session very similar to this, and I noticed that during the journey only myself and one other person used a pen. And this journey was from Wrocław to Munich, which is quite a long way. The other person, I was doing as I always do on my way to the session, I was scribbling my notes on my slides so I could remember what to say. And I noticed that sat just across from me on the train there was a student, presumably a medical student, who was drawing a very intricate diagram of a heart. Beautiful. Apart from the two of us, I didn't see anyone else use a pen on that journey. The conductor on the train had a pad. The waiter in the restaurant where I have my lunch had a pad. And it got me thinking that perhaps the only people who write by hand these days are teachers and students. Medical students, yes. So, handwriting is a topic that kind of interests me because I hope it doesn't die out. I'm going to ask you to talk about it for a moment because I don't know if, like me, I used to type a lot slower than I wrote. But these days I type a lot faster than I can write by hand. And I'm interested in your writing habits. So I'm going to ask you to talk to that same friendly person again, please. If you could just check that they're still awake. Wake up, he wants us to do something. And you've got 2 minutes to discuss 3 questions. Interrupting you when you're mid-flight, but we've only got half an hour left and we must keep going. So, a little chat. I'm very interested in your answers to the 3rd question. What sort of things do we write by hand still? Letters. To-do lists. Notes on lectures, yes. Letters of application, post-it notes, yes. What about teacher writing? Assessment of lesson plans, right? I still sketch out lesson plans by hand. And marking students' work, very good. Excellent. And of course, the other thing that most of us still write by hand is our signature. There's mine. I was going to ask you if it's legible, but you know what my name is, so that's kind of cheating, I guess. And does anybody know what's special about the sentence that I've written underneath my signature?
Every letter of the alphabet.
That's right, yes. It's got every letter A to Z in it. It's called a pangram. Pangram. So, handwriting. The study of handwriting is called graphology. And in serious circles, graphologists often work in law, looking at documents to see whether they've been faked or not, looking at signatures to see whether they've been faked or not. But there's also sort of pop graphology. And in pop graphology, it's thought that your handwriting can tell you something about your personality. You can't tell because it's on the screen, but I analysed my writing, and the letter size, I would say, is not small and not large, but medium, which apparently suggests that I'm a sensible person. I don't know if my wife would agree with that, but that's what the experts say.
So it's like you don't go to extremes.
I don't go to extremes. Yes, there's a physical relationship to the idea there. Yes. So by looking at things like letter size, the spacing between letters, how high you dot your I's, it is said that we might learn something about our personalities. And this struck me as a great topic for a lesson on personality. A topic that's very easy, of course, to personalise. And it's a lesson that starts with the discussion we've just had and then turns to an infographic type text on your handwriting and what it says about your personality. We asked the students to read the text, and as well as the information, there is language input. It comes from a one spread lesson. This is from the B1 level of Language Hub, and all the lessons in Language Hub are a full spread for each. Like all the lessons on the main spreads of Language Hub, you'll find that this one begins with some input and is followed by work on grammar and vocabulary. In every spread lesson, you'll find both of those things. And practice, and in this case it's practice of adjective plus preposition, good at, excited about, etc. Now, I gave quite a lot of thought to control practice when I was putting together the materials and how we could make it a little bit more interesting than, for example, Jenny is good blank baking. And the student fills in at, and there's Jenny, I don't like baking. How can we turn things around and make it about the students? Well, the obvious solution is to use personal questions or personal statements as gap fills. And so that's what I've tried to do in many places in Language Hub. So instead of Jenny being good at baking, the students fill out, what are you good at? And then, as you can guess, what they do when they finish the control practice is into a quick pair work, and they ask and answer those questions in pairs. So we've tried to put personalisation even into controlled practice. Remember what Moscovitz said, bringing the students' lives to the content brings the content to life. Before we move away from the book again, I just want to point out that the lesson continues with pronunciation. There's a very strong pronunciation syllabus in Language Hub. And then there's the final speaking task, which is what you'll find in all of the lesson shapes. All of the input builds up to a big final speaking task where the students use that language. And in this case, what we ask them to do is sign their names, write the pangram, swap with a partner, and using the text, tell each other what their handwriting says about their personality. Manageable at a pre-intermediate level. So, I said earlier on that we were thinking about taking the complexity out of language teaching, and that's more than just a marketing line. I wanted to explain what exactly we meant by that. First of all, with the help of the teacher's book. Simple things that we hope will make your lives a little bit easier. First of all, it's ring bound, because photocopying is stressful enough. Right? You don't need to worry about bending back and ruining your teacher's book. Photocopying what? Well, photocopying at the back of the book lots and lots of worksheets, extra worksheets for all the grammar and all the vocabulary that's covered in the student's book. And the same goes in the student's book. There's lots of extra work at the back of that too, because you can never get enough practice. What else? The student's book are interleaved. The student's book pages are interleaved in the teacher's book. So here you've got exactly what the students see, and here the teacher's notes. So you don't need two books, one will do. And with the same thing in mind, the answers are written in to the student's book page there in the teacher's book. So again, you don't need to go for the back for the answer key. A couple of more things that are right there on the teacher's book page. First of all, there's methodology guidance from good old Jim Scrivener, taken from his excellent book, Learning Teaching, the 3rd edition, right there on the page next to the lesson to which it relates. And the same is true for further teaching ideas from the Macmillan Books for Teachers series. Right there on the page next to the lesson where you use it are some further ideas. So you don't need extra methodology books. Anyway, all you need is that. Good? Alright, so let's move away from the book. We're going to talk about personalising output and what could possibly go wrong. But it's time for you to have another chat. We're going to do an activity for which you need pen and paper. Everybody got pen and paper? So this is a great one in the classroom, but there are 2 golden rules to this activity. If you or your students don't follow these golden rules, it won't work. Golden rule number 1. Oh, wait, let me tell you. In a moment, I'm going to ask you 5 simple questions and ask you to write down the answers, probably just a name, something like that. Very short answers. Golden rule number 1. You must write that in secret. Don't let your partners see what you are writing. If you see them trying to look, you have my permission to poke them in the eyes. Don't do that, I'm joking. I'm joking. Golden rule number 1, keep it secret. Golden rule number 2, please do not write a list. No numbers, and I don't want you to write the answers one under the other. No, 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 no. Please write them randomly around your page. Okay? Good, right? So, are you going to let your partner see what you write?
No.
Are you going to write your answers in a list? Always check your instructions. Everybody's ready. Question number 1. Please can you write down the name of a company or a product that you admire? Oh, my new Adidas trainers are just this. Oh, there's nothing better than my own. Write down a company or a product that you admire, please. Not in a list. Yes, question number 2. Can you write down the name of somebody who annoyed you recently, please? Maybe nobody in the room. Safer. How many people just wrote down their partner's name? Don't answer that question. Question number 3. If you're feeling very positive today, could you write down the name of the best film you've seen recently? If not so, you can also write down the worst film you've seen recently. If you're not a film watcher, it can be a TV series. You're not writing lists, right? Randomly round the paper. Beautiful. Same thing for a book, please. We must keep moving, time is running short. Finally, can you write the name of the first person you spoke to this morning? I'm allowed to. Right, jolly good. So that's the preparation stage over with. Now I'm just going to demonstrate what I'd like you to do in a moment with your help, if you don't mind. You don't have to do anything. I just want to have a look at your list. Okay. Now that says passengers. Now passengers, there is a film called Passengers, but also sometimes passengers are annoying when you travel, right? Was it a film? Or was it, did you like it or not like it?
I liked it.
You liked it. So that's what I'd like you to do. We've only got like 1 minute because we've got to keep moving, but can you identify what your partner's written, what it matches to, and have a little chat interrupting you when you were in full flight, but we must keep moving. So clearly this is a very motivating activity, judging by your response, but I think we all know what it's like to carefully set up your activity. You've planned it, you've given what you think are clear instructions, and you say to the students, off you go! And you're greeted by silence. Demoralizing. Or you've planned a 15-minute activity to finish the lesson. Fantastic, very nice, soon I'll be on the tram. And after 90 seconds, the students have gone silent. I'm very interested in why that happens. What is it? When it goes wrong, why does it go wrong? Why aren't the students speaking? Well, I gave this some thought and put together a list of possible reasons why it goes wrong when it does go wrong. And these are they. Have a quick look. So, in the first one, they don't have the language they need for the task that we've set them. In the second one, they don't understand what they're meant to do. In the third one, they may just not have the confidence to speak out loud in a group or to a partner. In the fourth one, they haven't had time to plan what they're going to say. And in the fifth one, they don't have any ideas. If you've ever taught teenagers, this happens quite often in the teenage classroom. I don't know. No reason to listen to their partners. I heard a few of you giggling at this one, but it's true, Friday night, they've been at school or at work for a long time perhaps, and they're tired. Whatever. We need to give them a reason to listen. And finally, doubts about the value of these kinds of activities, particularly the more experienced students. And we'll come back to all of these one by one, because of course there's no use pointing out the pitfalls if we don't think about solutions to those pitfalls. So our first pitfall was gaps in linguistic knowledge. Now we've done as much as we could in Language Hub to ensure that we feed in all the necessary language for that final speaking task, which always occurs towards the very end of the lesson, to try to minimize the chances that they won't have the key vocabulary and grammar that they need for that final spoken practice. We've said that perhaps the students don't understand the task, and that's probably our fault. That probably means we haven't given clear instructions, we haven't used a model to show the students what we expect them to say, and we haven't asked those small but crucial instruction check questions. Remember, are you going to show your partners? Are you going to write a list? Those are the kind of questions that we must ask in order to check the golden rules of our speaking activities. This is a tricky one to deal with, isn't it? Students that lack confidence. It may just be a facet of their personality, in which case there's a limit to what we can do about that. But I think, first of all, it's very important to point out to students, we know this as teachers, but to point out to students that there are times in the lesson where the focus is on accuracy, during controlled practice, for example. And there are times in the lesson where the focus is on fluency. And if we can say something like, just do the best you can with the language you have, don't worry too much about mistakes, perhaps we can build their confidence a little bit. And of course, by choosing personalised activities, as Moscovitz said, we're drawing on what the students already know. They're talking about a familiar topic in themselves, and maybe that will make them slightly more confident in tackling such tasks. We'll deal with the next three all together. Students may not have content ideas. Remember our teenagers? They haven't had time to think about what to say or how to say it, and they don't have a reason to listen to their partners. Now, I had these things in mind while I was writing the materials, and I think we can solve these through careful materials design. Let me show you what I mean. This is a lesson called Time Flies. It's about important life events. And after the language has been fed in, the final speaking task is to talk about 3 first-time experiences. the first time, for example, you went on holiday without your parents, or for your first child, for our older students. By designing this activity carefully, we can deal with those 3 pitfalls. Let's look at them one by one. No ideas, don't know what to say. Well, so I've given them some. Here's a box full of ideas, but there is the flexibility to use your own if you've got them. No time to plan. Well, I've built it into the activity. Section B here has some prompt questions. We give them a moment to take a few notes and to think and plan for success. To think and plan about what they're going to say. And finally, no reason to listen to your partner. Actually, what the students have to do here is talk about 3 first-time experiences, 2 of them true and 1 of them false. And the task for listeners at the end is to listen very carefully and identify which of them is false. So it's very simple, but I think it will help with a reason to listen. Through careful materials design, we can perhaps avoid some of these common pitfalls. Finally, we said doubts about the value of personalised freer speaking, particularly our more switched-on students, those who may have done learner training, those who are more experienced in the classroom, might be thinking things like this. There's no point in talking about ourselves if we use bad English to do it. Or, I speak a lot, but what is the point if you never correct me? The solution, I think, to the first one is something we've already mentioned, and that is emphasising that there are times to focus on accuracy and times to focus on fluency. A personalised freer speaking activity is a fluency-focused time. The second doubt is a very salient point. That is one that we must address, because as well as feeding back on the content of what our students say, we do have to pay attention to the language and offer them some corrections which help them to see the value in these activities as well as just fluency. And that can be difficult to do in a busy classroom where you've got, 10, 15, 20 or more students working in pairs and talking to each other. How on earth do we manage to do that? Well, using a technique called delayed error correction. Now, the first thing to say about delayed error correction is that it means that whilst the students are busy talking, the teacher is also extremely busy. You can't just check your phone. You've got to be active. You need to be able to, I'll explain what I mean by this, but get behind the students so that you can hear them. And I mean physically get behind the students. In a classroom like the one on the screen, you've got a horseshoe. So it's quite easy for the teacher to be behind the students. Why be behind the students? Well, because if you're not careful, one of 2 things may happen. And I've seen this week 1 CELTA training courses, trainee teachers who set up an activity wonderfully. So we're going to speak in pairs. Everybody's ready. All right, off you go. And they loom over the students. What happens when you loom over a student? Immediately they shut up, right? The other thing, which may sound strange, is I think you should avoid making eye contact with the students whilst they're doing these activities. Why? Well, because the same thing often happens. As soon as you make eye contact with a student that's in a conversation, they'll be like, the teacher wants to say something, or here's my opportunity to ask that question. And they stop talking to their partner, and you lose that fluency practice, which is what we're aiming for. That's what I mean by get behind the students, first of all. So avoid making visual contact with them. What you need to be doing is listening very carefully to what they say and noting down examples of both good and faulty language that you hear. And that balance is all important, of course. It can't just be all mistakes. There needs to be some good stuff too. I always go for 3 and 3. 3 wonderful things where the students have used the focus language correctly or even developed it, and 3 examples of faulty language. It can be very difficult to hear those. So what do you do if you haven't got 3 and 3? What do I do if I haven't got 3 and 3? I'll confess, I sometimes make them up. I sometimes make them up because I know the kind of mistakes the students are going to. Nobody knows exactly. If you add one or two in of your own, it doesn't matter. You have my permission.
So you can actually even check your Facebook during that time.
If you're a multitasker, you can check your Facebook at the same time, yes. So when you've gathered that language, during the final minute that the students are speaking up to the board with you, write up those 6 sentences. And then what we can do is, after feeding back on content, remember? What did you talk about? Tell me all about it. Then we can turn the students' attention to what's written on the whiteboard. We can ask them to work in pairs. Can you find the 3 good sentences? Can you find the 3 mistakes? And of course, can you correct those 3 mistakes? So even sort of error correction can be student-centered in that way. If you have time, in the next lesson you can revise, you can begin with some similar errors. Use your phone, take a photograph of those 6 sentences on the board and have a look. Class 4, okay, last week. Start with something similar. If you've really got time, you could even write out a small text or paragraph containing similar mistakes and ask the students to correct it once again. So, double correction. Good. All right, so I think we've just about got time for a summary of what we said. We started by talking about the definition, didn't we? We gave the definition of personalisation in the classroom, and then we looked at personalisation as a principle of humanistic language teaching. You may remember Gertrude Moskovitz, a book from 1978. Then we looked at personalising input. We saw that topic choice is very important, and we saw that even controlled practice can be made student-centered, can be personalised. We switched then to looking at personalising output. We looked at some pitfalls, and I hope I've suggested solutions to all of those pitfalls through either classroom management or indeed materials design. And one of those solutions to students who doubt the value of freer speaking is to offer them corrections on their language through delayed error correction. Just before I say goodbye, there aren't any students here today, are there, right? Good, okay. So we're going to have a little bit of a laugh at their expense, because over the years, I've collected examples of some of the wonderful things that my students have come up with during speaking activities. We do our very best, right? You take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Here are some of the great things that students have said over the years. In the very final one there, but creative maybe, I'm not sure. Well, all that remains is for me to say thank you very much for being so